Hi, I'm Allie. Join me in learning all the different ways that herringbone can be very, very versatile. We're going to be working on the herringbone stitch and all the modifications that you can make with simple seed beads. If you need any supplies, remember to check out the links below in the description of the video. Gather up some seed beads and let's get started. So to learn this herringbone stitch, it's really great if you already know herringbone and then just start with these modifications. I'm going to put in the description below the video, that little down caret on the right hand side below the video, if you're watching on a mobile, or right below the video in the description, a link to the flat herringbone stitch tutorial. That's helpful before we go in and learn new herringbone techniques. I have here 3 11-ohs and 3 8-ohs and 1 15-oh to get our project started. I'm going to be using approximately 5 to 8 feet of thread to work through and get my bracelet done. To start out, I just have a small piece to work with to show you how to get started. I'm working with a size 12 needle, 10 or a 12 will work, and I'm working with some green wildfire beading thread. At the end of the thread, I'm going to put a stop bead onto the project. And you'll notice the different beads that I'm using really are a great combination of finish and texture. For this design, it helps to make the project stick out more and make those change-ups a little bit greater if you have some lines, some metallics, some mattes all mixed together. We're going to begin our herringbone stitch, and on your piece, I want you to leave approximately 12 inches prior to your stop bead. We're going to start with a simple ladder stitch, and we're going to go 3 herringbone rows wide, which is actually going to be 6 rows wide. I'm going to put on 2 beads and 2 more. So back up through the original 2, starting at the stop bead, and then sew down through the 2 that you just added. That's going to be your first row of your herringbone stitch. 2 more beads, back through the beads that your thread was coming out of, up through the beads that you just added. 2 more beads through the opposite side of the beads your thread is coming out of, and down through the 2 that you just added. That finishes off my second row of my herringbone. 2 more beads going into the opposite side, going back through, and then 2 more to get my 3 sets of 2. There I have my starting section to work off of for my herringbone. There's different ways that you can start this. This is the one that I find easiest for beginners and makes a nice simple end. From here, we're going to step up and begin our herringbone stitch. So from here, I need to step up and begin my herringbone stitch. To do that, I'm going to pick up 2 15-ohs. I'm going to use the 15-ohs along the side of the piece to hide the thread, because otherwise you see some thread gaps, especially as we go in and do 2, 3, 4 drops of the herringbone stitch. We're going to add 2 15-ohs and sew from the bottom bead up to the top bead, putting those 15-ohs right along the side. Now I'm set up to go in and start my herringbone stitch. 2 beads go on, I'm coming up bead number 1, and I go down bead number 2. And those 2 beads fall to the side. Sewing up through bead number 1 of our second row of herringbone, add 2 beads, sew down through row bead number 2. For our third row, up through bead number 1, so you can see I'm going between those 2 beads in that initial ladder stitch. 2 beads, go down bead number 2. That's going to make your first row and set you up for herringbone. You'll notice that the herringbone has that V look, that the beads sit kind of end to end as you're working with them. That gap will close as you do your next beads in rotation. I'm going to flip this over because I like sewing from the right to the left. Just like we did previously, add those 2 15-ohs and then step up to our first bead there in the herringbone stitch. Once again now, I'm coming out of bead number 1. Just like we did previously, I'm going to add some 11-ohs now. Instead of adding 1 bead and then a second bead, we're going to add 2, 3, and 4 beads. 2 for the right side, 2 for the left side. go down bead number 2, and then we're going to go once again up bead number 1. This is 2 drop herringbone. 2 beads go on the right, 2 beads go on the left. Coming down then, bead number 2. You can see I just kind of play with it a little bit. Then I'm going to go once again up through bead number 1, add 2 beads for the right, 2 beads for the left, and come down bead number 2 and make those cooperate. Flipping it over in my hand, you can see that it's still that same exact herringbone stitch, but instead of 1 bead at a time, we're doing 2 beads. Just like I did previously, I'm going to grab 2 15-ohs and then sew back up through those 2 beads on the right hand side there, those last 2 beads that were added. That gives me a chance to do that 2 drop, and now I'm going to go down 2 beads at a time instead of 1 bead. Just like we did with the 11-oh seed beads, we're going to do the same thing now with more 8-oh. Switching each row a different color. I have 2 8-ohs on the right, 2 8-ohs on the left. And instead of going down 1 bead for the side, I've gone down 2 beads of that 2 drop. Then I'm going to go up through my set of beads on the right for the next row, add my grouping here of 2 8s for the right, 2 8s for the left, and down beads number 2, which I'm grouping together. Give a nice tight pull. Once again then, switching over to the 3rd row of the herringbone stitch and going up both beads on the right hand side, adding in 1, 2, 3, and 4 8-ohs, 2 for the right, 2 for the left, and sewing down through the 2 beads on the left hand side. Giving that nice little pull, and you can see that sets up that next row of herringbone. Now there's a ton of modifications that we can do, and we'll go into that. Here on the side, you just need to figure out exactly how many seed beads are going to sit and lay that you're not going to see any extra thread. So for my 2 11-ohs, I'm going to use 3 15-ohs. And I'm going to sew back up through those 2 8-ohs on the right. And that gets me ready for my next rotation of seed beads. So as you progress with your herringbone stitch coming out the top of this grouping of 2 8-ohs, I've added 8 11-ohs, so increasing 4 to each side, and I'm going to drop down through again both of those beads on the left, or my grouping of bead number 2. Pulling that through there then, you can see that it sits kind of in a loop. Same deal here at the end, going to go through and up those 2 beads. I'll do 2 more rotations of that grouping of 4 and 4, and then I'm going to show you when we get to the end how I'm going to step up, and we're going to add a little bit of a twist for this freeform version. So changing it up again, I'm stepping up the side here, adding my side beads, and then going up through the first 4 beads on the top. From here, I'm going to switch over, we'll do 2 high. So I'll do 2 drop, meaning 2 beads on each side, and then come down the opposite side. This time, to show that variation, instead of coming down completely to the bottom, I'm just going to come down 2 out of the 4 beads and then exit. It gives it just a tiny bit of a different look and a different pull, and I'm going to again just go up 2 of those 4 beads. So just the last 2 coming up through the top, adding in that metallic violet, and going down again, just 2 on the other side. Now why? It just gives a different look, gives a different feel to it, and it creates a little bit more of a linear look rather than that V'd action. And the more you play around with this in this sample piece, the more you can look back if you want to make it consistent in a different design, which will be coming up in a couple weeks. So you can keep it consistent in a different design doing that. Here when I'm at the end again, I'm just going to come out just those outer 2 rather than going the whole way to the bottom, add in my 15-ohs, come out the top, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a different version. So here I'm just going to go back to my single herringbone, come down those 2 beads there, and when I come out the middle of the herringbone rows, so again we have those 3 rows, I'm going to come out the middle, and I'm going to add something in between the middle. Just one simple little 15-oh before I go into my next second row of herringbone and up through the first side. Once again, my 2 beads get added on. Come down through the other side. Again, I can do 1, I can do 2 beads. It's up to, oops, got an extra bead on there. And then we're going to add again that 15-0 in between. So I'm going to take that, add my 2 beads, come down. Once again, between, oh, now I've got 2 high. Anyway, we'll keep going. Between those 2 rows, I'm going to go ahead and add in my 1 bead there and circle up through those 2 top. This is a good idea also to show you how you can change up the pattern a little bit, going higher in some sections, lower in another, and how to change that and problem solve if you have it. So we'll keep that in here. So there I have 2, here I have 2, and in the middle I have the 4 high. So coming out this side, I'm going to correct this error. I'll do 3 15s, step up into that first, add 2 more, step down, and then if I want to equal it out, here's your problem solving for your herringbone. I just step up 2, don't add any beads, step down 2. Super, super easy to even out your rows on your herringbone stitch. If you want to not have them even, that will create a little bit of a wave in your pattern, in your project. Adding 2 here, and now my sides match. Coming back up through, adding my beads along the side, going back up through here, and then once again onto the next section. So I can keep adding, subtracting, adding some height, playing around with what beads I put in the middle. So here I have some 8/0s to form inner and outer lines. Like I said, a video in a week or so, we're going to have more detailed in that. And you can really play around with the design, getting kind of that floral or butterfly look by adding beads on into the middle. I want you to progress and keep going with a different version of your stitch. And it doesn't need to be consistent. It can be completely freeform, which is why this is called freeform. Going in and adding 2, then 1, then 2, then back to 2, 2, 4, adding 2 different color mixes together in one, adding an 11 and an 8 and an 11 all in one row, and just creating these really nice consistent lines. So after your last row of your herringbone stitch, and you can see I've really changed up all the different patterns and designs and made those nice kind of lines. I'm going to add my clasp. You can do a 3-strand clasp. It's easy for the number of rows of herringbone if you want to do a multi-strand clasp, but I love the way that this ClaspGarten magnetic Art Deco clasp fits with the design, so I'm going to use that. Here on the outer edge, what I'm going to do is create points to kind of mimic my clasp. Coming out my last row of my herringbone, I'm going to pick up 1 8/0 rather than 2, sew down, and then I have that bead there. Sew up. You can use a wire guard. I'm going to sew literally right through the magnet. From there, I'm going to sew down through the other side without getting stuck on my pliers. From here then, once again, go back up through, pull that nice and tight, add my additional 8, and come on back through. Now what I'm going to do is retrace my steps. So I'm going to retrace back through here and go down 1 more bead, pop over 1 more bead, so down through this row below it, and then come back out through the top and reinforce that thread line. This is not only going to make the end of the bracelet a little bit more stable, but it makes sure that you're getting enough thread passes through the clasp. So here on the end then, I'm going to go through that bead one more time, exactly what we just did, going over here, back through the clasp. When I go through the clasp now, I'm actually going to circle through it twice. I'm going to sew through, once again, loop around through, and then sew down. One more pass going further down the design so I don't see all that green thread, and that side is attached. Just like this side, I'm going to do the other side. Now the herringbone is directional, so that's one thing to realize. So when I go back to my starter side here and take off my stop bead, between my rows, I'm still going to add that brass bead so that that the lines look the same and they match on the sides. But the exact same way, take off this stop bead, add an 8, add your clasp, add an 8, and reinforce to finish off the design in that beautiful, beautiful bracelet. Once you have that other side attached, you're just going to burn down the thread ends, but you can see how nice that makes the ends look with those extra 8/0s there. You can even use 11s and slide that magnet if you have this one. It's strong. Slide it to the side, and then you get that nice, easy click with that ball as part of the design. And you can see that I even ended the bracelet differently and created those beautiful lines. Thanks so much for joining me in creating this Freeform Herringbone Bracelet. It's really fun to play around with the basic stitches and see how you can modify them to make them your own. Remember, if you want to check out supplies, you can check us out at PotomacBeads.com, and there's links right below in the description of the video. As always, you can give a little thumbs up and give your feedback in the comments section. Thanks so much. Hopefully you enjoy this little herringbone tips and tricks to create your own, and stay tuned for the next video.